we literally coach people through, this paradigm of who are you uniquely. And I mean, like we get really granular, and what is your purpose? And it's really fascinating because a lot of people, including myself, I kind of operated in a capacity, as it were, that I thought was kind of true to my nature, but I never really had someone come in and ask those questions to get really clear, real clear on it, and thus meaning, to those things that I was participating in.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our ongoing goal is to help our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. Totally appreciate you for taking time out of your day and joining us and being a part of our journey as we move in the direction of greatness. Now, speaking of direction, just the same way a ship needs a compass to navigate the vast expanse of the ocean, our true purpose acts as our internal compass, guiding us through the journey of life, leading us towards fulfillment and success. David Osk is an inventor and an entrepreneur dedicated to helping individuals unlock their true potential and live authentically. With years of experience in creating innovative products and coaching others, David brings a wealth of knowledge and wisdom to our podcast today. And now in this episode, Dave shares his insights on finding purpose and authenticity, highlighting the importance of self-awareness and resilience in achieving one's goals. His own journey of self-discovery and overcoming challenges serves as a powerful example for all of us seeking our own path to fulfillment. So now that we're all set and we're ready to go, let's turn to our conversation with David Osk. Enjoy. Hey, David, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's great that you can make the time like this.
Well, Audley, thank you for having me. Honestly, a pleasure, really an honor to be here with you.
Thank you. Well, listen, as we were saying off the top before we press record, how much, for me, this is a blessing and a treat and a privilege to be able to to engage in these kind of conversations, with the intent of wanting to help others get to that better place. We talk about, living the best audacious life here. And so it's about how we get people to get to that level, if you will. And so thank you again, I really appreciate you being a part of this journey with us.
Yeah, man. Thank you. It's funny, by the way, we often use the word audacious. I'll be honest, I had to look it up and just to make sure that I kind of I love words and I just wanted to make sure I understood it. But it's interesting that this idea of risk, is involved with that word, right? It's about taking risk. And
Yep.
something I just didn't quite, I don't know, equate here. So yeah, anyway.
The funny thing is, I'm gonna throw you. You like curveballs, or throw curveballs. I would venture to say that being audacious really is about being the core of who you are, who you're meant to be, authentically you. And if you're being your true authentic self, there's no risk involved with that at all. You're just being you. You're showing up in the world as who you are. And it's funny, this audacious journey. It's taken me a while to sort of understand that for myself.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of times, any time that I have fallen back on me and been who I'm supposed to be,
Yeah.
when you talk about impact in the world and how it resonates with people and the difference that you can make and how inspiring you can be, I think it's huge. And so when I start to sort of realize the power in that, that's when
Yeah.
it sort of the needle moves, so to speak, for me.
Man, you're speaking my language there. So it's funny. Over the last couple of years, I've been working with a friend of mine who's in my mastermind group, Dr. Andy Garrett, and we literally coach people through, this paradigm of who are you uniquely. And I mean, like we get really granular, and what is your purpose? And it's really fascinating because a lot of people, including myself, I kind of operated in a capacity, as it were, that I thought was kind of true to my nature, but I never really had someone come in and ask those questions to get really clear, real clear on it, and thus meaning, to those things that I was participating in. And in fact, when I did a bit more deeper work in that area, and of course, Dr. Andy's a clinical psychologist, he asks questions in a really unique way so that it helps you dial in on those things rather succinctly and quickly. I started to kind of pivot a little bit too, because I realized I was operating, in a, I'll use that language from the book, The Big Leap. I was operating in a zone of competence,
Okay.
but not in that highest good, in that zone of genius, as, Hendricks says. And but yeah, I love that idea of dialing in, and when you found that, right, you kind of follow the clues, you start feeling different, right? You feel
Right.
comfortable in your own skin and natural and genuine and resilient. And that word authenticity becomes a whole lot more powerful.
David, as you talk about that sort of journey to discovering yourself and finding yourself, I smile because oftentimes, I'll even use myself for example, once you get to that point of realization, you're like, of course, it's
Yeah.
only natural, right? The things that you were already and maybe you didn't recognize their greatness in the moment. Maybe you took them for granted. Maybe you thought of it not really a big deal because it comes natural to you, so you didn't
Mhm.
think it had value and worth. But when you get there, you're like, of course, this is what it is. And
Yeah.
then the fun part, if you sort of look back and you can sort of see all the things in your past, so you connect those dots, and it all makes sense. They all were pointing in that one direction.
Oh man, isn't that neat? I remember growing up, my I grew up in Minnesota, with a lot of fantastic people, but a lot of kind of Midwestern, maybe Scandinavian kind of views, where
Okay.
your identity and so on was really about more about what do you produce? What do you do that others would assign value to, as opposed to you assigning value to something?
Right.
And it was, and largely too, it was, how hard do you work? Like, how
Right.
many hours are you putting in? How loyal are you to your boss, as it were? How,
Yes.
like, it's this idea of production and so on. Not that some of that stuff isn't, is bad, but at the same time, as I've kind of grown in understanding of myself and so on, I realized that much of my life, so I'm in my late 40s now, and so much of my life was really looking and searching for an identity. Like, I want, and for me personally, it was more like I want to accomplish some things so that the world,
Right.
if you will, would clap and, and find the applause of people around me, as opposed to, really understanding, who am I? What type of a dent in the universe? I love that language.
Yep.
Do I want to have uniquely, like really uniquely? And how can I enjoy, instead of searching for fulfillment, how can I bring the fullest expression of myself just to experience fulfillment, as opposed to be, looking for something? And so in my 40s here had a real shift. And again, that's not something that you do on your own. I was so grateful to have been surrounded by people that helped me kind of understand, understand a new, correct a paradigm.
Right. 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 Um, Maybe David, for our listeners, they're wondering a little bit about you and your work and your background. If you could just sort of fill us in, because I think once they understand that, things will make a lot more sense as we continue on here.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, just yeah, who you talking to here? So um I grew up in a little town in Minnesota with one stoplight, a little town called Glenwood, and it's just fantastic. I moved to Nashville right after high school,
Okay.
as a vocal major at Belmont University. So what's funny is, my earlier life, and even some people now, because I continue to sing. I've got a concert in 2 weeks, but I've cut 3 records, and I continue to sing professionally. But I kind of keep
Um,
that life a little bit separate from my entrepreneurial endeavors. So I've been running my own company, been self-employed for about 6 years now,
okay.
and that was actually based around an invention that I worked on actually with my brother-in-law. And we came up with the world's first thermostat guard with a combination lock. So you probably see in restaurants and offices and things, a cover over a thermostat so people
Yes.
can't tamper with it.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we invented the Stat Guard Plus, which is a stat guard with a combo lock. So you don't have to worry about, losing or keeping up with some tiny key.
Ah.
And so I worked actually in facilities management for a large telecom chain for many, many years. And of course, in our stores and call centers, we would use stat guards because everybody kept jacking around with the thermostat.
Right.
But again, nobody could keep up with that little key. So we ended up just coming up with a better mousetrap situation. And, that's been a heck of a journey. We can talk more about that as well. But I ended up getting into Home Depot about 6 years ago, and the Lowe's chain
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
let's see, a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And we just got into the True Value distribution chain. So
Yeah.
we're
Okay.
trying, those stores are all individually owned. So we're
Yep.
looking at getting in there. But and yeah, just super thankful. Much of my life, I was always drawn to people that were, entrepreneurs, and
Yes.
not just business owners, but people that um, loved ideas, that loved creating things, and love, not just onesies and twosies, but like, real expansive type thinking. And
Yes.
but I didn't really realize that was me until, midway through life, into my, probably in my late 30s. And I'm just having a blast now. We're creating, several different products that are kind of in the pipeline, as it were. And, once you get a win, right, you're like, oh, what's possible
Right.
now?
Like
It just
that.
helps
Yeah.
you. It helps you kind of expand your horizons a bit. And so I also do some coaching as well. You mentioned that for yourself. So my coaching is really around kind of what you teed up this conversation with regards to, this idea of who are you uniquely. If you have a question mark inside of you, you're going to feel that. You're going to walk into a room and you're going to feel, we use that term imposter syndrome, right? You're going to feel
Yes.
like
Yes.
well, I got to fake it till I make it, all that bull crap. And so you're going to feel that question mark, but guess what? Your wife, your kids, your coworkers, other people are going to feel that as well.
Mm.
And so one of the things that I love to do, and after, we walk people through our coursework, I always say, "Hey, I'm David Osk. Let me introduce you to yourself." And it's such a blessing to look at someone and to validate, you know, the the riches in them, not just the zones of competence, but those things
Yes.
that, what is it? I like to say, by the way, I think I got it from a Nissan commercial. What is it that gives your goosebumps? What
Uh,
is it that puts that lump in your throat that's just like, wow? What is it that breaks your heart? What is it that makes you mad? What is it that when you're doing it, with a full heart, do you feel like you're not working?
right.
That flow state, or the zone, as they, often call it. It's amazing how many people, and again, including myself, kind of walk around with such ambiguity in that area, and they feel like
Mm.
they're just a cosmic mistake, and that
Right.
somehow they have to figure it out. And I don't know what your worldview is, but I believe the word authenticity
Mhm.
comes from the word author, right? We didn't make us.
Right.
I didn't choose my eye color, my taste buds. I didn't choose my personality. We don't
Right.
choose anything. And those of us who have children know that they come out of the gate very hardwired, right? You can sense your children's disposition
Absolutely.
very early. I'm talking, just a matter of maybe weeks or months. I've got two children, and of course I have two siblings for that matter, and we're so different. And when a child is, 0 to, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old or something, right? They're not thinking about being authentic. They're just doing their deal. And they're so vastly different and wonderful. And what's fascinating though is when you understand, right? What did God put in you, right? How did
Yes.
He craft you to your very DNA? What are those desires that you have? That's who you are authentically. And when you
Yes.
identify that identity, right? That's what you're identifying, that gold. And then when you start operating, in the truest essence of who you are,
Yep.
you have a sense of authority, right? So you got author,
Mm.
authenticity, authority, because
Yes.
you've then predetermined well in advance of an obstacle or an opportunity. How is David showing up? What am I going to say yes and no to?
Right.
You understand, we talk about core values quite a bit, in our coursework, by the way. But I like to ask the question, like, oddly, what does your core happen to value most of all?
Mm.
And it's amazing how you just a slight little,
Yes.
different
Yes.
lens on that, And guess what? Your different, your answers, the hierarchy of those values are going to be different than mine, and they should be. And I hope that my son Parker and my daughter Catherine, right, they'll have nuanced differences and all that kind of stuff. And so what I love, again, kind of as an introduction here, I'm writing a book called The Guardians of Grit. And
Okay.
I'm really excited about this because I'm gearing it really toward men initially because I want to help men understand how do you create gritty, children, and what does that mean? Like,
Right,
what's the difference
right,
between
right.
resilience and grit? And resilience is bouncing, getting up quickly. You get knocked down,
Yes.
you get up
Yep.
quickly.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And grit is I'm going to do something difficult over a long period of time because what's on the other side of that hill is worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
But here's the linchpin where I think not only did I get it wrong, but most people get it wrong. Where's the fuel? And quite often I'm doing something over a long period of time because I want the applause of those around me. I want
Right.
I want people to like me as opposed to I know who I am. And if I get knocked down like a basketball, it's it has a predefined circumference and description.
Yes.
For a brief moment you smash it on the ground, right? It loses its shape, but then it
Right.
bounces back to what? The
Right.
predetermined values
Doesn't
that it has
change.
been assigned. And it's those values, of course, that we draw from, in order to build grit, because it's kind of a muscle, to do hard things, to build a life for ourselves and those around us. And
Mhm.
so I'm, as you can tell, by the way, I get pretty passionate about that kind of thing.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you loud and clear because especially, I mean, for me, the resilient piece is big because, and bouncing back is exactly what that is. Oftentimes say to people, we know and we understand and we recognize that in life there's going to be some pretty crappy things that's going to happen. And oftentimes you're not going to get a heads up that it's on the way. No one's calling you to say, hey, 3 o'clock, your life's going to go upside down. It happens when it happens. And in that moment, you really have to respond. Now, what that choice is entirely up to you. When we talk about bouncing back, I sort of talk about the long bounce, right? Because
Mm,
it's really how quickly you choose to bounce back is entirely up to you, and there's no wrong answer. So if you need to take a day or two to figure it out, that's fine. If you need to
yeah.
act in the moment, that's fine too. It's whatever works for you. So that bounce could be longer for some than others. Again, but there's no wrong answer. And I think that's really important for people to embrace and understand. It's whatever in the moment they can do for themselves to get through that point is what that and that's the right action. That's the right answer, really.
Yeah, isn't that neat? I love that. It's like you got to have grace for yourself to process,
I love grace.
even when you're a kid, you get punched in the mouth, right? Well, that's maybe literally, maybe metaphorically, and it's like, man, I need to understand and acknowledge that hurt, or
Yes.
that created uncertainty in me, or whatever that is. And if I get up again, what am I getting back up for? And two, it's more like it's not what am I defining, it's who I'm defining, that's going to handle this situation. And I think that quite often, of course, people get knocked down a bunch. And it's like, you know what? It's just way more comfortable here on the ground because even if I get up, I'm really not sure who I'm getting up for anyway.
Right.
And I just don't want to get pushed down again. So I think I'm just going to stay down.
Mm,
And I think that that's where I get really excited about, helping men, especially, um, build a worldview that everyone around them, especially those closest, are made of something spectacular, and that I get to have the pleasure
right.
and really the authority as the dad, right, or the leader, to look at someone else and to mine for gold and to say, I want to name these things in you, and discover those things with you and validate those things. By the way, my favorite quote, and I've got it right behind me here,
Mhm.
is by a guy named Benjamin Disraeli. He's
Okay.
a former PM of England back in the 1800s, but he said, the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own. And man, what a
Huge.
wonderful
Yep.
paradigm just to love anybody, right? And that word love, I mean, sounds a little bit sticky sometimes, but you know what? I don't care. If you're in the workplace and you're helping someone, what are you doing?
Right.
You're loving them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's the greatest expression of anything in life, to cause someone else and their true essence to kind of be uncovered a little bit. And it's like you're
Yes.
giving them permission to run with their head thrown back and
Yes.
be the fullest expression of who they are.
Yes, yes. I think it's so fascinating. We're talking about resilience, and as an inventor and a creator, how connected those two are. Because to be a successful inventor, you're going to have to fail, and in fact, you're going to need
Yeah.
those failures to gain successes. And
Yeah.
so, if you're an inventor, and your ability your ability to bounce back is difficult and hard, well, you're not
Yeah.
going to be that great inventor because you need those failures, right? So I just think it's really interesting how we
Right.
build on what we do to get better.
Yeah, man, a great way to say that. I had a buddy of mine the other day when we were talking about, the book and so on. He said, so what is the promise here? And it's really that this idea that the promise of pain, the
Yeah,
promise of difficulty is if you push through it to the other side, you're going to be introduced to yourself.
right.
You're going to find, you know what I mean?
I
It's
do.
as opposed to there's a lot of pain and insecurity. I'm going to go hide.
Right.
You're not really hiding.
No.
You're just covering up the truest essence of who you are.
Yes.
And what's fascinating is by the way, in all of my endeavors, I've received 10 times more no's and
Yes.
just I mean completely
Right.
ghosted
Right.
by people than I
Right.
have yeses. I've only had a few yeses. I mean, literally, I've had hundreds of no's
Sure.
and a few yeses. And there
Right.
there were years. I'm talking years, like the first
Right.
4 years of my business. I didn't believe in myself. I stopped believing in my product.
Right.
And but here's the fascinating thing, right? Through all of that pain, I'm not going to say that I'm uh, just Mr. Grit here, but boy, I've grown, and I've
Yes.
grown to
Yes.
be able to have a conversation with somebody, and they don't quite get what I'm doing, and be like, you know what, that's okay, and I'm going to try to help them regardless because
Right.
it's
Right.
not the right time.
Right.
And
Right.
but grit, I think, is it's not this white knuckling, right? It's not bear down and put your head down and be a bull. I think that grit is way more about consistency and wisdom and kindness.
Yes, yes, yes. Continue, and the word consistency is a perfect one for it, because you need to continue to push forward. I'm imagining that getting into Home Depot wasn't as simple as, hey, one call, I'm here, and they're like, come on in, right?
Oh
It took
man.
some time. You probably had to find the right person, and that person had to connect you to another person, and that person had to say, well, let's talk, and you might even gotten to know along the way. Who knows? Like, I mean, that whole
Yeah.
process. Actually, I'm curious. Can you share
Yeah.
what that process was like, just to give people an understanding?
Well, it's funny. You really summed it up. And I
Like I was
yeah,
there, right?
yeah. To paint the picture this way, right? I'm working for a large telecom chain and their real estate group.
Right.
Great job, great people. I loved it.
Yep.
And and of course I made all the mistakes, like the quintessential mistakes. If you build it, they will come, right? So
Right.
here I am. I've got 7,000 thermostat guards sitting in my garage, and nobody knows about them. And I am one of those guys that's like, you know what, if I'm gonna go, go big or go home. So
Right.
but with regards to Home Depot and so on, these bigger companies, you can't call them. I mean, literally, if you call them, it says if you know your party's extension,
Right.
dial it
Right.
now.
Right.
If you're a potential vendor, you go on their vendor portal online because they want to know who are we dealing with
Yes.
and do they have the financial ability to work with us. They don't even, I mean, the product is one thing, it has to be viable, but they want to know if we say yes, can they
Yes.
say yes? Because
Yes.
I mean, you have to stock the shelves, in thousands of stores and keep a bunch
Yes.
of units sitting around to
Yes.
restock. Do you
Yes.
have the ability to pull that off? Well,
Right.
of course I didn't. And, I mean, so here's the funny thing. We ended up getting on homedepot.com first.
Okay.
And the conversation was, hey, we'll put you on the website first, and then we'll test you in some stores. Well, the gentleman that said that, he ended up changing positions in the company, and he's gone. So the new guy is, learning his position, and great guy. He's just trying to figure out his life there, right? So I was the last one on his list to talk to. So another 2 years go by, right? So I'm just like, you've got to be kidding me. Like this is,
Wow.
all this waiting around. And so 2 years goes by. I'm actually sitting on the tarmac in Nashville, flying to do a concert, and the phone rings, and I'm like, well, I'll just answer it. And it was a very quick conversation. Um, they said, hey, this is so and so at the Home Depot headquarters. We would like to put your product in 1,300 stores. Can you do that? Well, of course, like Richard Branson from Virgin Atlantic or whatever, I said yes. And he says, he said, always say yes and then figure it out. So I said yes, and I honestly I knew I could figure it out.
Right.
And so I ended up partnering with a company, licensing it to them, and it's been a 7-year partnership that's been fantastic. And I yeah, I look back and I'm like, you know what? That was like honestly just a complete pipe dream. And then you get lows, right? And you're like, well, okay, now we're actually, we're able to add value to a lot of people, right? Control
Yes.
energy. Why don't give that money to the power company? Give it to your team at work or your
Yes.
families or
Yes.
whatever
Yes.
that is. And, don't have to worry about, keeping up with some tiny key. Well, here we are with True Value now. So I'm hoping we can grab some attention, from these store owners and help more customers and so on. And, but yeah, the journey is never straight, ever. And
No.
I can't tell you how many times I'm like, I just can't take the stress around this. Like it's, the
Right.
uncertainty. Are they
Right.
going to say yes? Is this going to
Yes.
happen?
Yes.
It's tough.
Yes.
So, really, oddly, in doing a podcast like this, right? This is not about me.
No.
This is about your audience. And I just want to say, if there's, you know, got questions, feel free to reach out to me too. It kind of goes without saying, but stay with it.
Yeah.
Don't give up. If you believe in your product, just you might be, what is that book? 3 Feet from Gold, right? It's
Mm.
like, don't give
Yep. Yep.
up.
Yep. Yep.
And yeah,
Oftentimes, it gets the most difficult. That means you're really, really close, right?
I think
And
you're
and
right.
and that's when you need to put. What the harder it gets, that's when you need to push even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, by the way, one thing I think I need to say as far as my story too is, I was really grateful to have, some help along the way too. So in the early days, right, I had people kind of come alongside, encourage me,
Yep.
and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff, because it's success is never found alone. And then, I guess it's been 6 years now. I joined a mastermind group, so now really, I've got a core group of 10, but I have 150 other men that are a part of Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind who,
Yes.
are my board of directors for my business, kind of a virtual board. And then I've also got kind of a band of brothers, right, for my personal life. So in order to keep doing hard things, right? Yes, we need to understand who's coming to the table. We need to understand, that authenticity and identity piece clearly, but at the same time, we become, like the people we spend the most time with,
Yes, we do.
and meaning we gain, their good attributes, well, or bad for that matter, right? And
Yep.
that's we know that's true because we don't want our kids falling in with the wrong crowd. And but that goes that same paradigm is true for us. And I'm so grateful that I have, been able to find a group of men who I can draw wisdom from and borrow courage from when I need it, and
Yes.
raise my hand and ask for help.
It's so important to have that support circle, um, I've always said, like, we don't achieve success by ourselves.
Right.
Every single person at some point in time has had help from someone. I used to, and I'll fully own and say that I used to, believe in this notion is, I'm a self-made man and I did it all alone. not realizing, no, I have not. And I'm
Yeah.
lying to myself if that's what I truly, truly believe. And so
Yeah.
to your point, I think groups like, mastermind groups and are fantastic because that, and sometimes it's not even that something that they actually give you like physically. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's just an outside perspective or a new way of thinking or an idea.
Yeah.
And for some, you get that little spark and you're like, oh, and I'm gone and I'm off to the
Yeah.
races, right? Again,
Yeah.
it didn't come from you. It's
Yeah.
out there already, right? So
Isn't that's wonderful? I had my buddy Glenn the other day texted me one morning because I've told him that my mornings are, if I'm going to struggle it's usually the morning. It's like getting that
yep,
rudder pointed in the right direction.
yep.
And he texted me a while back, and he just texted me, "Hey David, it's morning. It's time to pick a fight."
I love it.
And it was like, oh man, I just like right back, like, oh, of course, I'm fully resourced for what I need right now. And I believe that, in the counsel of many there's wisdom, and I get to ask, for help here and there, and I got guys in my corner. Like, it's amazing that the horsepower. I like this idea that kind of to what you said, it's there's more caught than taught.
Mm,
And doing deep, and I'm talking deep friendships with people, you
yes,
you you catch so much more than what is actually said.
yes, yes.
And it's unbelievable, that paradigm that you become like the people you spend the most time with. And I would, and with that, caution people. If you don't have an inner circle, you better get one, because your life depends on it.
Yep.
And if you do, be really careful at the people that you let into that most inner, place, because you want people that are acting in noble character,
Yes.
and those who will say hard things to you, even, right, and challenge you on some assumptions, and challenge some language, right, because
Right.
a lot of times I'll say something out loud, and one of the guys in my group will be like, hey, hold on, Osk, that's not you, come on.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm like,
Yep.
oh, it's, but then again, I've given them permission to
Yes.
read my label, challenge me, and say anything.
Yes. Yes. That's what you want, right?
Yeah.
That's really what you want. And if you're running from that, then that's not you be clear. You got to be clear on what it is you want, because
Oh yeah.
it's not going to be an easy journey. But
Right.
I say over and over again, when you get to that point, it'll be a worthwhile journey. The journey is
Oh,
worthwhile, never easy, but it's worthwhile. And so,
I love
um,
it.
amazing. David, this is awesome. And one last thing I want to ask you before we go, and so we got that listener that's out there, and maybe they're at that point of, I can't do this no more. Maybe they're at the point of, this is way too hard. Or it's not, I wasn't expecting this. What would be your word of advice to that individual?
Yeah. So, here's something else. And so I'm going to jump back into the deep weeds here real quick. So you have to understand yourself. Self-awareness is everything, because it gives you a real basis to stand upon. So just to paint a picture real clearly, if you have a child, so say he's, you know, 17 years old, but he's 130 pounds soaking wet, and he says, I wonder if I can be an NFL lineman one day, right? And you're like, oh yeah, you got this, buddy. Just go for it. Well, okay, we live in the land of the free, home of the brave, but that would be not only just ignorant, but cruel, right? If you're 130 pounds and you want to be an NFL lineman, not real
Mm,
true to your nature,
right, right.
right? Not only are you probably not ever going to realize that, but you're going to waste how many years trying. So I really believe that if you have to have the courage to look at a situation, and to say, is this really true? Is this, whether that's where you're headed, is this true to my nature? Or, what, I had to look at this, is this product and something I've been working on, something that's really viable in the marketplace?
Yep.
So be really careful, though, who you get advice from, around that.
Mhm.
And so I would say, again, in the counsel of many, there's safety. And but you've got to be able to, in with authority, ask those hard questions. But if you have answered those questions, and that there's demand for whatever service or product that you have, it might just mean you need to tweak your message a little bit, or, just find the right partners, or, whatever that is. Um, but I would just say, don't give up. It's the saga, the quest, the story that's unfolding in your life. It would be nothing if it weren't for obstacles and hardship. And it's like going out in the desert for 3 days and no water, right? That drink of cold water, that success, as it were, is
Right.
going to be magnified by 1,000, as opposed to you're in the desert for 20 minutes. So part of the paradigm of life is doing hard things, thus your joy being increased. And that story has been told over and over in every single song and fairy tale, and for thousands of years. But again, there's some other stories being told there, right? There's a story of friendship, there's a story of help, there's a story of the older teaching the younger. And if you're trying to white knuckle it all on your own,
Right.
and then you blame yourself for not operating in the full breadth of the story, you're really missing out. So I would say, surround yourself with people who can love you and help you, and give you wise counsel.
I think it's great advice, and it goes back to that whole notion that we're not doing anything alone here. We don't find success by yourself.
Yeah.
Um, David, this has been awesome. I really appreciate this. A great convo, and I thank you for
Thank you.
being on the podcast. We here for listeners that wanted to connect with you directly or learn more about your work, or maybe
Yeah.
the masterminds as an example. What can we share with them?
I would just say, yeah, obviously, if someone has gotten this far in the podcast, they know what I'm into. So I would just say, if there's something I can do to help you, no strings attached, let me know. I mean, we love coaching, we love product development. And I would just say, go to my website. It's davidask.com.
Awesome. David, this has been great. Again, I appreciate you taking the time like this. Lots of fun, and all the best, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Back we are here on the podcast, and as David reminds us, the key to living our best audacious lives lie in understanding who we are at the core and embracing our unique gifts and talents. By staying true to ourselves and surrounding ourselves with a supportive community, we can overcome obstacles and reach new heights of success that we never thought were possible. Hey, listen, connect with Dave directly for more inspiration or guidance. And we have, as always, the contact details provided in our show notes will enable you to connect with him, reach out, and take that first step towards transforming your life today. Thanks as always for checking out the Audacious Living podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, and share. It's one of the ways that helps to help keep this podcast growing and evolving and reaching more people in search of audacious living. Stay tuned for more empowering content, and remember, your audacious life starts now. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.